7 o'clock. Let's call the meeting to order. It's a regular meeting, the Mount Holly Planning Commission for Wednesday, June 21st. First item is changes to the agenda. Are there any? Hearing none, agenda is approved. Approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes for approval tonight. Special meeting and our last regular meeting, distributed by emails. Any changes, corrections, additions, etc.?
None.
None? Everybody good? On Zoom? Bridget, all set? You're muted.
I was not at the last one, so I can't vote on that, but the other one I was fine with.
Okay. A motion to approve both sets of minutes.
Second the motion.
Or so moved.
You can't make the motion, right?
I can, but I didn't.
I'll make the motion.
Andy makes the motion. Seconded by Andrew. All in favor of approving both sets of minutes distributed by email? Say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Unanimously approved. Do we have an administrative officer report tonight, Faith?
Yes, mainly building construction registrations. One received from Gwen and Philip Lyscal on 2062 Belmont Road for converting a porch to year-round. Secondly, from Andrew McDermott on Summit Road Extension, building a storage building for tractor and attachments, 14-foot by 22-foot new structure. From Harold Berenson at 1216 Lake Nineveh Road, construction of a new house, a residence. It will be a 3-bedroom residence, as I understand it. He does already have his wastewater permit and is constructing a drilled well. I did also check that there was no issue with the flood hazard or river corridor. From Alyssa Tilley, I received a retrospective BCR clarifying that the Belmont General Store had, sometime in the past 10 years, had changes made to the apartments to divide the single apartment into 2 apartments. And I also got from her a BCR to clarify her current proposals for the Belmont General Store going forward. The main work that she's noted here is updating the layout of the store, returning the barn part of the store, which is on the right-hand side as you're looking at it, to its original storefront, and updating the apartments from a 2-bedroom apartment and a 3-bedroom apartment to 2 studios. And then the last one I've received also from Alyssa Tilley is in relation to the 50 by 32 foot pavilion being constructed on Okemo View Lane in just off Hillville Road. Just some additional information on this. It was raised also at the select board meeting, and so I did seek a jurisdictional opinion as to whether or not this would invoke anything to do with Act 250, and that opinion has come back at this stage saying no, it wouldn't. So those are the BCRs that I have received. I don't know if anyone's got any questions.
The store with the changes, does that have to have a report or thing if it goes over a certain value or no?
I don't believe it falls within the 50 feet.
It's not within the 50 feet, but also as an existing structure. My understanding is that they're not changing the footprint of the store. They're actually reducing it if they remove the concrete structure in front of the barn. The one other issue which I believe is in hand, but we'll check, is a new wastewater permit.
And one thing that I think we mentioned in email, or I mentioned in email, is that we're going to want to just, if you can, at your next office hours, touch base with Carol about making sure that you get the copies of the wastewater permits going forward, and that way we can keep a closer eye on that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
The jurisdictional determination, was that, what set of, if you know, what set of facts was that based on? Their representation of this being used for their
It was based
child's
on
wedding, or?
it was based on the BCR submitted, the direct response of Alyssa Tilley to an email that I sent her asking if it was going to be used in any way for public or commercial purposes by her or anyone in the family. It was also based on
Her response was no,
at this
or
stage, no.
at this stage, no.
And it was also based on her ownership of the store and Daniel Tilley's ownership of Mount Holly Beer, because they are also the owners of the Okemo Lane property.
So I don't know the answer, but I'm curious to know how it works if a use changes from private use to commercial use after a structure's already been built.
Well, then it would be triggered.
It would trigger Act 250.
And that's the owner's problem.
It's interesting.
In what you mean?
If it's in violation of their determination or whatever.
Right, they might have to retrofit the facility to comply, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's possible. I think so. There was another question at the last select board meeting about a barn that I don't know anything about. But a barn and the Crowley Fields lot or in the vicinity, and whether or not that needed a BCR. Have you heard about that? I think that was from Craig. or maybe Kevin.
Both of them did mention it. It does raise a question about, I mean, I don't know when it was built.
How far back you go.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
there are many structures in town that I understand have been built without BCRs.
Sure.
If the select board would like me to pursue these retrospectively, then I can start that work. But I think it could be a hiding to nowhere.
Right. Got it. Anything
One
else?
of the questions that came up was that the fact that this big structure they're putting up there is advertised on the internet as something besides a wedding pavilion for their family. And also the next section down being advertised on the internet for some sort of camping.
I did give all of this information to Quinn Mann, who gave the jurisdictional opinion, and was told that at this stage it doesn't trigger Act 250. And as I understand it from Alyssa Tilley's response, the HIP camp, the campsite, has been advertised for some time, she said, several years. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Okay. In the interest of time, since we do have a guest, I'm going to bump my report till after the presentation. So it's quickly, I don't think we had any other emails basically to report, and we'd have no subdivision proposals.
No.
Okay, great. So let's go right to our special guest tonight is, hopefully I'll get her name correct, Lynette Cladone. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, you did. Thanks.
And she has graciously agreed to come tell us a little bit about some of the things that she works on, and is certainly relevant to some of the planning that's happening in town relating to wastewater solutions and stormwater systems. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And I'll just hand you the floor. And
I have bad luck sharing in Zoom, but I'm gonna try to share a screen. I think I'll go to one monitor. I'm hoping that will make me more successful.
we see something on your screen, so that's good. All right, we see it.
Okay, great.
Good work. All right.
So my name is Mike Ladone. I'm a professional engineer working for the state of Vermont in the Water Investment Division for primarily the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, but I also am the project lead for the Engineering Planning Advance program and the Village Initiative program for water and wastewater. My colleague Emily Hackett might be able to join us later in the presentation. If she does, let me know so that she can jump in and introduce herself. She was recently hired to help out with the village effort and some of the ARPA funding that we got for supporting village systems. I like to do this presentation more as a dialogue, so I encourage you to ask questions and get involved in the presentation so that it's more interactive. I can go for as long or as short as you want me to talk. Probably the presentation, like without any questions, is at least 20 minutes, but I can go for hours. So don't let me, if you want to get home and enjoy the rest of the sun. So overall, this presentation is called Case Studies in Community Wastewater Disposal Systems. Mount Holly is not alone. There's more than 200 villages in Vermont that lack any sort of community wastewater treatment facility. So in this map, that's the red dots and the blue dots. The yellow dots have sewer only, and the green dots have both water and sewer.
There we are.
So as we're going through the presentation, I'd like you to know that the first thing to know is that we aren't talking about building a big wastewater treatment plant that discharges to a river. That most likely any solution is going to be a soil-based decentralized wastewater system. So in this graphic, let me know if you can see the cursor.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. So this graphic shows some individual on-site wastewater systems, like the little brown squares, like a house, and then it has the little black is the septic tank, and then it goes out to a leach field. So, so these in this graphic, that's individual examples of individual systems. Next, we have small cluster systems, which are highlighted by the pink circles. So those are, in this case, 3 houses sharing a common septic. And up here, 2 houses sharing a common septic. So those are permitted. The individual and the small clusters are permitted through the WW program. That can go up to 24 houses. So you can see in this part of the graphic, the cluster systems can be quite large and still share a single disposal field. There's another program at Vermont DEC called the Indirect Discharge Program for any system that is larger than 6,500 gallons per day. And so that's represented by this pea green area. So there's a number of houses on there, and they discharge to dual alternating septic fields, and that represents that program. Any questions on the slides?
How many houses would be on that larger one?
Anything above about 24.
Okay, thank you.
That's what that village would have to have.
So a concept to introduce as part of the presentation is what's called the affordability metric. So this is a metric that EPA decided during the 1990s as part of a combined sewer overflow report. And so they considered that users would be able to afford a bill provided that the annual user rate divided by the median household income of the service area was between 1% and 2%. As we go through these slides, we're going to see a lot of examples, and we're going to bring them down to the annual user rate. The first example is in Warren, where this is one of the first projects more recently in Vermont. Warren was able to build their system in 2003. Their system is much like the graphic that we were just looking at. There are 10 individual systems, one cluster system with 3 properties, and then a very large indirect discharge system with 78 properties. In 2020, their user fees were almost $1,200 a year. They were able to get a number of different grants to support the project and bring down the capital cost of running the system. So what does that system in Warren look like? It looks like a athletic field. So all of the leach field for that disposal system is under these ball fields.
So when you say the bring down the operating costs, so that's there's still costs in addition to what the individual users are paying.
Yeah, so there's when you're looking at the user rate, you're looking at an operating cost and a capital cost for the debt repayment on the project.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I have a question too. Hold on, let me unmute myself.
I can hear you.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. So, when you say capital costs, are you talking about like an amortized capital cost of constructing it? Or
Yes.
Okay. So there's a cost of construction, which, and then there's the ongoing maintenance, repair, so forth. So the user fee is paying both the ongoing
Capital
paying down.
and the correct.
Okay, thank you.
So on the other side, there's some tankage for the wastewater system, and one thing that's interesting about this picture is that if the systems had an odor and smelled really bad, the vent pipes that we're seeing here would have a different style cap on them. Because if these caps were green in color, we would know that there's an activated carbon filter on there because people thought it was stinky. But they don't have that. They just have plain vents. So nobody's out there complaining about the odors. Another example is in Brownsville, Vermont. In 2016, they were able to build their community solution. In their case, they were able to build a sewer extension to a regular wastewater collection system. They did that in part because Ascutney Ski Mountain is right near their village. The mountain was going bankrupt. That mountain had a sewer system that went all the way down into Windsor Village, where it's treated at the Windsor Main Wastewater Treatment Plant. The town of West Windsor was able to purchase the Ascutney Mountain sewer system with a loan from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. When all that stuff was going on, Irene happened, and it damaged a number of the septics in the village. So they were able to react to that with their completing their planning study and going after some FEMA related grants, and they were able to get their village connected up to that nearby municipal system. It was only a half a mile, so it made a lot of sense for them to do that. So their user fees around 2020 were $865 a year.
So a question on this one, it says the debt repayment was split between Grand List and the users. Was that the same as the previous example? Or no, was the previous?
So I understand that in Warren, they also put some of the debt repayment on the Grand List, but not all communities do that. this story in Brownsville is especially meaningful because their school was able to grow population. They converted a number of the ski rental housing into affordable housing units, and they saw an increase in their school age population, and they were able to add a cafeteria to the school as well. Rochester, Vermont has one of the oldest community wastewater systems in the state. They, in 2018, came into the program. And at the time they came in 2018, before they did their refurbishment project, their user fees were $340 a year. Their refurbishment project involved refurbishment of one of their 3 disposal fields. And if you've been to Rochester, it's a pretty vital village that they have there. Grafton Village did a study probably 10 years ago. That study resulted in a recommended project that was in the $3 to $4 million range. Grafton at that time decided that was too expensive. But rather than doing nothing, what they decided to do was to create a town ordinance related to septic pump out. So, and this is a 2020 era figure, but the cost of a pump out in 2020 was about $285. So every 5 years, the owners in Grafton Village have to produce proof of pump out. The town is still concerned about their ability to do any sort of growth or redevelopment within the village, and they're currently back in pursuing another system. So how does this compare to individual on-site wastewater systems? We have a limited data set from the on-site loan program, and we took those loans that we'd given the capital costs out on, and we amortized them and costed in the regular operation and maintenance that would go with the normal individual system. There's 3 types of systems. So we were estimating that for a conventional gravity system, that would be under $1,000 a year. That for a mound system, it was more closer to $2,000 a year. And for an innovative alternative system, it was more likely in the range of $3,000 a year. Any questions on this slide?
So wait, why would anyone do the innovative alternative?
So in a lot of cases, if there's a really, really small lot, or if the lot is close to a lake or a stream, they would have to do an innovative alternative system. So in those systems, there is, the regular septic tank. And then after the septic tank, there's a treatment process. So that is often a mechanical based treatment process with blowing air and rotating things. There are passive processes that don't have any mechanical anything. And then after that, then they would have the leach field or mound component. And if they have a mound, it has to be dosed. So there's often a pump station. So those tend to be more expensive.
So are you saying that they couldn't get a permit for septic any other way?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any more questions?
For the innovative alternative, how small lots do those usually fit on?
It's a really good question. I'm not sure I know the answer. There's innovative alternative solutions for the leach field component, and there's innovative alternative solutions for a treatment component. So With the leach field component, they can do some nice alternatives related to, if you have a wooded area or if you have a steeper area. But all of these are really predicated on having enough distance to the groundwater to be able to get a permit for that.
Does the innovative alternative category include closed tanks?
It does not include a holding tank, if that's what you mean.
Yes. And
Yes, I have not costed out a holding tank. The holding tank itself is not very expensive. In that case, it's really the pumping cost. So,
right.
If you have a holding tank, it often can be, basically the same size as your septic tank. And then you have to have it pumped out regularly,
Right.
which may be, for a homeowner, maybe twice a week.
Might be, I'm sorry, what?
For a regular homeowner, maybe twice a week. It's really expensive.
Right. Thank you.
So in Waitsfield, they had a wastewater problem and they looked at all the different solutions and they decided to go with a drinking water system. Because by going with a drinking water system, they removed the requirement for septic permitting of having the well shield protection areas protected. So in the case of Waitsfield, they did build a new drinking water system. The system went in around 2012 timeframe, and in 2022, their user rate was $628 a year. But they also, at the same time, were looking at a community wastewater system, and that bond vote failed, and they needed to repay $1 million in planning and design loans to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. So what they ended up doing was creating a community loan program. They funded that loan program by taking the loan from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and then having sub-recipient agreements with several local businesses in order to lend out to them. Any questions on this?
Sorry, in order to what?
So the town ended up taking the loan for these businesses and having sub-recipient agreements. So the business actually repays the loan to the town, who then repays the loan to the state.
Thank you.
There's a lot of benefits to community wastewater systems. You can include a management system like Grafton and Warren. You can have improvements in water quality, lessen public health risks, infill and development, if that's what you want. And you can also allow for economic development. And they can be environmentally and economically sustainable in the long term. Getting the systems going is often a heavy lift. When working with communities, we're very conscious and aware of privacy concerns and trust buildings. So as communities that are working with our program, we encourage them to have any surveys and failure information to be collected by the consulting engineer and then aggregated for reporting. Please don't tell me directly about your failed system. There's a Vermont state DEC policy on working with communities with failed systems that you can read from our website. And when there is a failed system with surfacing effluent, there is a public health requirement to make sure that that system isn't making anybody sick. So we usually recommend fencing it off with snow fencing and regularly putting down lime to kill any of the pathogens. So So keys to a successful project include a strong wastewater committee, making sure that you include a broad variety of people that would be in your service area and with different skill sets. Encourage visioning, so working with the planning commission and planning organizations to make sure that what your village wants from your planning side is carried through onto the engineering side of the wastewater study. Villages that have higher capacity are better able to complete the project. But if your town doesn't have capacity, we can help fund a regional planning commission person to help you to basically provide some of that capacity for you. And obviously finding the right funding package so that you can meet that affordability goal is really key. Next, we're going to talk about two projects that are in the works. The first one is Westford. So they have a very modest project around their town green that has a $3.3 million total project cost. But Westford has an unusually high median household income. This is in Chittenden County. And so when you look at the affordability for the different parts of Westford's funding package, if they had 100% loan on their project, the user rate would have been still considered affordable at 1.7%, but it would have been $1,600 a year, which nobody really felt like was affordable because there are some fixed income low housing units within the village. And so the rest of this chart sort of shows like how much percentage of grant they need in order to get that loan into a more affordable range where they felt like their taxpayers would say yes. Their bond vote is coming up. So fingers crossed they'll be moving forward. We were able to give them a substantial grant with the ARPA funding, and we're hopeful that their voters will approve the project. Next, we have Montgomery. They have two villages, Montgomery Center and Montgomery Village. Between them, there's 192 total connections. The project cost initially $11.8 million. It's creeping up more towards $20 million. And they have a loan and grant package that's now out of date here, but we've been able to help them out with some ARPA funding and some other funding to get their user rate down as well. Montgomery also did a lot of legwork to look at other income options for helping to fund the project, including impact fees. So it's the fee that a user would pay when connecting to the system. And then a local option tax, which did pass. So both of those passed. And then they considered putting some on the grand list as a sewer benefit assessment, and that did not pass. Additionally, Montgomery was very interested in a proposal that the Agency of Commerce and Community Development was pitching to the legislature for tax increment financing on a small scale called the mini TIF, and that also did not pass the legislature. So if you guys decide you want to go ahead with a study for your village, there's two current funding opportunities available. There's the Engineering Planning Advanced Program. That is a loan. There's no cap on the money that's available to be borrowed, but there is a limitation every year of how much is available. It is available on a first come first served basis. It can only be used for the planning stage. Repayment is only required on the loan if the project ever goes to construction. There's no interest ever accrued on this loan. And it's one eligible use is you can use 25% of that advance towards having the regional planner help with your project coordination. So the second opportunity is with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. So that's my primary job is with that. we have loans available with 100% subsidy up to $125,000. So what that means is it's a loan, but the principal of the loan is forgiven up to 100% for the first $125,000. If you were to borrow over the $125,000, then that amount needs to be repaid. If you have to repay it, it is a 5-year term. But it doesn't start until after 5 years. And there's no interest on that as well. But it's also on a first come, first served basis. The opportunities change every fiscal year. The fiscal year, we anticipate this is starting again in the coming fiscal year, which is July 1st. So if you're interested in doing this and want to pursue the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, you should apply as quickly as possible. Currently, nobody in the last 2 years has applied for an engineering planning advance. Everybody's chosen to go with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. The major difference between the two is the time involved. And the Clean Water State Revolving Fund takes a couple months to turn everything around. And the engineering planning advance is more like 6 months to a year to turn the funding around. With the engineering planning advance, even though it's a loan, most of the village projects that we've seen move forward have been able to have that engineering planning advance money credited to their grants once the project goes to construction. So effectively, it's a loan that gets converted into a grant. Any questions on the funding?
Does that happen on the Clean Water State Revolving Fund also?
Which part? That you have to pay it back? Is the
Well, you
question
said that on the engineering planning advance, it gets turned into.
a grant? So the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, when you sign the loan agreement, will have all the terms of the loan agreement. So if you get subsidy and don't build it, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
That doesn't change.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Good question. Anything else? I can't see anyone, so just jump in.
I don't think there's
Right. What's that?
I think we're all
all
set.
set with that slide.
So recently there was a decision on eligible areas versus local planning areas. So in this case, we're looking at East Montpelier Village. East Montpelier Village has a statutory 1/4 mile buffer around it that's a neighborhood planning area. And so our subsidy money is limited, and any grant monies that you might be eligible to receive are limited to within that 1/4 mile buffer area. If you wanted to serve something outside of that 1/4 mile buffer area, for an unsewered village, if they include that area in the initial project, then they can take loan only for it. If it's after that initial project, then we have to consider it a sewer extension, and there's different programmatic and legal requirements for sewer extensions. Any questions on that?
So wait, with that one, I'm assuming it's best to designate your area as large as you might ever need.
Yeah, basically. So I pulled up the Mount Holly. This is from the State Planning Atlas. Belmont Village is here, and the 1/4 mile buffer that goes with that is shown with this this line.
Okay.
So what I like to do next, if you have time, is we can go through some of the constraining features and just talk about your specific village, or we can stop now and you guys can ask questions, or
Question on,
whatever you want to do.
you can hear me?
Can you hear us?
What's that?
I just had one question on the last part about the quarter-mile buffer.
Yep.
You mentioned the, is it the waste producers must be within that area, or the entirety of the system?
So just the service area. So to use your language, the waste producers. The disposal area can be outside there, and we would find the disposal area eligible and, the pipe to the disposal area. But if there were homes that you wanted to pick up on the way along that pipe, they would not be eligible.
Eligible for those funding sources that you
For
mentioned?
the free funding sources, it's eligible for loan if you only want to fund it with loan.
Right, got it. Thank you. I guess one follow-up question on the sort of way you've characterized those projects. Those were all projects that were not part of any specific district, like a fire district, right?
Right. So the decision to become a fire district usually happens after the bond vote. So most communities, they want to do the feasibility study, get a read on whether the community likes the project, and then they might proceed with a little bit of design or not, and do the bond vote, and then continue with design if they have a positive bond vote. And during the design phase, then there's the opportunity to set up the fire district.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Were there any more questions on this, or do we have, I think we have a little bit of time to move on to what you have next.
So you'd like to go through the planning exercise?
Sure.
Okay. So this is the Agency of Natural Resources Natural Resource Atlas. I have turned already on the layer for the designated centers. So it's a salmon color and almost invisible. So I apologize for that. And that's why I was asking where your village was, because it's really hard to see. But what I like to do is sort of go through and look at the things that might be constraints. So wetlands are a constraint. This is where there have been wetlands permits issued. Then you have a lake, so you have projected shorelands. There's other informational layers for wetlands. Then in terms of, we also need to avoid any hazardous waste sites or landfills. So we like to click on all the layers. In the waste management section. In terms of rivers, we can't fund a project that is in a flood hazard area, although we can fund like replacement of individual septics and that in the river hazard area. We turn on all those layers. And let's see, hard to do where there's a landslide. And hydric soils is also a wetlands indicator. So there's a number of properties like around your village that don't have any of the warning signs on them, so that's good. Then the next thing we'd look at would be to see if you have any large sand and gravel deposits nearby. Looks like you do. That could be good news. And then you can also look at the soil ratings for septic, and just as a group, maybe your next step would be to decide if you want to pursue this, and if you thought there'd be any willing landowners, and if you wanted to pursue hiring an engineer and applying for the study.
Which study specifically? Feasibility first?
So yeah, so we recommend that the villages in general start with a study, because it sort of gets the door open to other funding mechanisms. So while we say feasibility study, the report that opens all the doors for the funding agency is a report called a preliminary engineering report, which is more detailed than a feasibility study. But you can also come in and ask for basically what amounts to half a report, and follow the requirements up through the first half and decide if you think this is for you or not. Do you have more questions?
Any more right now? No more questions right now.
Okay.
Actually, I do. So the parts
Okay.
highlighted and are, hydric or wet sites or hazardous waste, all those are areas for which you would not consider a disposal site, or you would not.
Right.
Okay, only disposal sites.
Right.
Okay. The service area could include those areas.
Yes.
Okay.
It's relatively easy to get permits to address any of those issues, but what we can't do is dispose of the wastewater where any of those things are concerned.
Right. Now, are there limitations on how far you could pipe material to a disposal plant?
It's really limited by cost. So it's not like a drop dead figure. It really depends on how many users you might have. And if you have very few users, the closer the system, the better.
Right. So the area at the bottom left of the map, right behind the scale bar, so to speak, there,
Yep.
on our screen, does have some soils that are on the ideal suitability layer in the on the atlas.
Yeah.
So if you scroll down a little bit more, it's not just sand, but it's the whatever highest rating there. Yeah, just right about there.
Yeah.
Just outside of the river corridor.
Great.
And that would be less than a half a mile from the village, I'd say. Let's see, half a mile is actually more like, is it 3/4 of a mile?
Yeah. Anything within a mile is fantastic.
Okay.
Really.
Cool.
If you find something closer, you save a bunch of money, but if you can't,
Are there any
farm.
are there any
Right.
soil conditions, be it wetlands or whatever, through which one could not run a supply line, a waste line?
So when we find rock and ledge, they usually remove it by blasting or other mechanisms. If the soils are contaminated, we usually change pipe materials and take actions to mitigate any potential for those contaminants to move into the pipes. But again, it comes down to cost. And if the product is still affordable with the constraints that a community has.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Just in terms of some of the funding costs that you mentioned in your earlier examples included purchase of land.
Mhm.
Examples where for the disposal site, landowners have allowed use based on some kind of easement without necessarily selling the land, and what complications would that have?
So for us to fund something on an easement, it does have to be a permanent easement. So then the landowner is still retaining the ownership of the land, but then the community is protected by the permanent easement. Some villages have people donate the land.
Sorry? Say that again.
Some villages are having land donations. So you might find somebody with a large parcel that's closer, who's civic minded, and they want to donate their land or donate the easement to their land.
So are the easements purchased easements?
Well, sounds like some.
Yeah, so permanent easements are typically purchased and land purchases are purchased.
So on the
and-
picture where you had the athletic fields, how often do you have to come in and dig that up because something's failed? What's the expectation on that?
Really on a 20, 30-year cycle.
Okay, thank you.
Not often.
Okay, thank you.
What if how would you feel if a landowner were willing to grant an easement, but it was conditional on the town maintaining the system? In other words, they don't want to have a failed system sitting on their property.
That particular thing I think would be excellent. Yeah. Yeah, I would hope nobody wants a failed system.
But in a certain sense, it's revocable. So I'm just wondering if that would be seen as.
Yeah, I'd have to go to our attorneys on that one.
And in terms of a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, if the landowner only wants to grant an easement if a system is to be built, and then the system to go forward or the project to go forward requires having the easement in place, I mean, have you encountered that issue, and which typically does come first?
I have not encountered that issue. A lot of the villages, I've only been with the program 10 years. Some of the projects take longer than that. So the ones that I've had direct experience with, they're still in the land purchase negotiation phase.
Okay. And in terms,
Or they had a donor, which is different.
and in terms of, I know this probably depends a lot on the particulars, but what is the typical size of these?
That depends a lot on the particulars. So if you have a very well draining soil, the system is substantially smaller than if you have a poor draining soil.
Got it. And of course, probably the number of users as well.
Yeah, that is dependent. There's a lot of variables. It also depends on you if you want to support growth and development in your village or other types of commercial uses.
Right. So in other words, in order to determine what the particular design or size of the easement granted would need a designed system.
Yeah. So typically, the engineer would start by assessing what your existing uses are in the service area and determining what you would need just to move those folks over to a new system. Then they talk with you about your visioning and what you want in your town and see if there's anything extra that should be built in. Then they come up with a target figure for what they're looking for in order to look for the capacity that they need in that land. So if it's a poorly draining site, they need a large area. But if it's a well-drained site, they would need a smaller area.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You have a lot of larger parcels near the village. So I wouldn't necessarily rule those out because you might want to look at the cost benefit of piping out to the well-drained soils versus having something that's more local to the village.
What? Did you say what the distance, the maximum distance is for piping?
There isn't one. It really depends on what's affordable to your town.
What's the optimal one, would you say?
The least distance, the better.
Okay.
So, like if this parcel were available and reasonably well draining, that would be great.
Okay.
But it might have some wetland. You'd have to figure that out.
It's sort of, that's a wetland. I'm making an assumption here that having a gravity-fed system would be better in some way or easier to build. Is that correct? Like if you were draining by gravity down to or relatively close to the disposal site.
Right. So if your flow travels by gravity to the disposal site, there's energy savings because you're not pumping it. But the energy savings that you have are offset by the influent infiltration that sneaks into the gravity pipes. So that's basically extraneous groundwater and surface water that somehow manages to get into the sewer. So the more gravity pipe you have in your system, the more of those extraneous flows you have to be able to deal with within your septic area. So a lot of the villages currently are looking at what's called a step and stag system, which is septic tank effluent pump and septic tank effluent gravity. And those use smaller butt fused plastic pipe, so that there's basically very little opportunity for any leakage to go into the pipe. With the gravity systems, those are still gravity, but you can also use a combination of step and stag tanks at each home. Each home would still have a septic tank, and whether it left the home by gravity or by pump would really depend on the geometry of the particular lot and situation. And there can be a lot of savings in that, both in the long-term flows, and in the initial capital cost.
Is that what you were looking for? Or your question was basically like if we don't have to pump it way uphill to get it to the disposal site.
Well, in this particular example, and if we are looking at down with Tarbleville Road there to the sandy soils, that is a downhill slope. And so what I'm hearing, and maybe tell me if I'm hearing it incorrectly, that the piping under what would essentially be along or under the road down to that site is liable to pick up water infiltration along the way.
Right.
And that
but
is your needs in terms of the size of your disposal site and potentially holding tanks at the bottom of the hill, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yep, well, that's true.
Okay.
But those are all things you can work out during a study. There's so many variables that like you can adjust this and that and the other and really optimize what works for your town and what meets your long-term goals.
Right. I'm assuming a planning study, an engineering study done by a professional engineer would run through all of these different scenarios and we would be able to pick one that looked optimal for this particular case.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Any more questions?
I'm just perplexed how a gravity pipe would pick up other sources of water. I assume the pipe is impervious and would be connected in a way. I mean, just curious how that happens.
So the pipes have joints like the pipes come in segments, right? And they have joints at the segments, and the joints are usually pretty good, especially when it's new. But as the pipe ages, those gaskets that are at the joints, they dry out. And then, if you have high groundwater or if you have tree roots, like they can, the tree roots can push into those joints, and then it gets pretty leaky.
And something you said a moment ago, I'm aware of the option that each waste producer would have their own septic tank and then feed the drainage field. Is there an example of a system that doesn't do that, where there's some kind of combined tank that's the homes use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're going with a classic gravity system to a shared field, the tanks can be at the end, like before the field, versus at each and every home.
Would there be any savings to having the homeowners have a tank that collected most of the solids and then had some sort of pumping ordinance so that there was less solids in the municipal system, or no benefit?
So the benefit to the step stag system, which has the tank at everybody's house still, the benefit to that is related to the capital cost of the rest of the system. So there's reduced, because of the nature of the pipe used in those instances, because it's all continuous. It's fused plastic and doesn't have joints. There are advantages to that. When Clean Water State Revolving Fund is funding the septic tanks, the expectation is that the town would take over the septic tanks and that the town might start a pump out program as part of the regular services.
John?
Is that to save homeowners money?
It's hard to say, like in the long term, if so in the short term, I'm not sure that it would save the money. That's something the engineering study could tell you.
Okay.
I've heard from John that there are a number of failed systems historically in the village, and that's an ongoing concern.
Okay.
So if, with the shoreland and the wetlands, like the water table may be higher, and that may lead to the more expensive system types going in.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question here.
Just on asking about like the houses on Star Lake, the presumption is they would have to pump up to get over the hill. So how would that be handled? A common tank and one pump, or each house had a pump? Or is there an alternative method?
There is an alternative method with the septic tank effluent pumps. It's basically a septic tank, but it also has like a little pump in it. And when it pumps out, it's going into a low pressure sewer that is made out of that butt fused plastic pipe. So that's a reasonable way to, and usually cost effective to handle, if there's a part of the collection area that does need to pump, but you don't necessarily want to have a pump station. You can also have a separate collection system that goes to a pump station for that area, and then that pump station would pump into the rest of the collection system.
So taking a step back a little bit, you mentioned a couple things at the top about how villages or towns typically start this process or embark on this journey. One of them being establishing some kind of wastewater committee. Or, what do you have any specific recommendations for our case and what the steps maybe could be or should be? And, especially in terms of sort of maximizing our ability to get funding for this by doing the right steps in the right order. Is it something that, is there something we can be doing in the short term to start preparing this potential project?
So starting a wastewater committee and getting that committee authorized by your select board is a huge first step. And then asking the select board if they want to authorize the committee to go through the process to complete the application and find an engineer.
Okay, and specifically what application is that? For what?
Whichever funding application you choose to apply for. It could be either the engineering planning advance or the Clean Water State Revolving Fund.
And usually it's the wastewater committee that works on the application, but the application is authorized by the select board.
Yeah.
Right.
So you'd need to work hand in hand with your select board and have good communication with them. Sometimes planning commissions will take it on. Sometimes the committee will have someone from the planning commission and someone from the select board and someone from the service area and maybe an engineer that lives locally or a contractor that lives locally.
Right, and I did hear you say that it is important to have some people or even a large segment of people from the service area. Is that right?
Yeah, the project's more likely to be successful if you get people who are directly affected by the project to get involved.
Right. All right. Okay, I think
It's also sometimes good if you get someone involved who doesn't like the project.
It's good too.
It is good too, because then you can engage with that dialogue early and often win people over.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem. Okay, thank you so much. Do we have any fun?
Appreciate it.
No problem. Let me know anytime if you have more questions. Don't be shy.
This has been very informative. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Would you
Take care.
be sending me those slides that we can share around too?
Yeah, that's no problem at all.
Thank you so much. If you could just email those, that would be great.
Yep, thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks again. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. So let's see. We'll try to wrap this up pretty soon. My report, I think I did a couple of conversations with people that I said I was going to. I did finally connect with the U.S. Forest Service District Ranger, Martina Barnes. They are not going to do the logging this coming fall as originally thought. She's going to get back to me on some of the recreation stuff we've kind of been floating around. They do have an interest. It's very, they don't have a lot of time and money. We would have to find somebody to take on, sort of push for it on our side. And that is, what we talked about was better signage, trailheads, some parking, and maybe a marked trail or two. But they're open to it. New trails may get into NEPA permitting, so we probably want to do that and stick to the existing trails.
I was going to say there are quite a few existing ones.
Yeah, there's quite a few. It's a matter of sort of making loops. They're quite extensive loop. They're long. They're not going to be like half an hour hikes, but I think we could do something with what we have without too much work and money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another conversation was with the VAST folk, variety of VAST folks. For Steve Howlett here in town, and then he gave me contact for the state VAST Trails administrator, Matt, and I'll have to get you his name later. And they were both wonderful to talk to. They're both very supportive of the things that we've been talking about doing in the draft town plan. They are open to the idea of four-season trails. Of course, it's up to the individual landowners or whether that's allowed. They also, VAST has a couple of thoughts about the Station Road Bridge. They may be able to help us out with some ideas if we don't want to, if the select board decides not to put a car bridge there, or if VTrans doesn't give us money for a car bridge, we might be able to at least get pedestrian and snowmobile bridge, because it is a very key component of the VAST network. Let me see if there's anything else really important about that. I did talk to both the Forest Service and VAST about the Greendale Bridge. I think that's a good conversation to be continued. Nobody is excited about putting out money for that, of course. I think it's everyone's contention. It's a town bridge right now. They will get back to me about connecting with their recreation manager at the U.S. Forest Service. And one really interesting thing is Matt Tetreault is his name, Tetreault, from VAST, the VAST Trails Administrator. I talked to him about getting better, more accurate trail information for a town plan. I think that would be really nice to have an accurate trail map. This is actually really cool. So if there are landowners in town who want to permanently protect the VAST trail that crosses through their land, if they're interested in that, VAST will fully fund that effort, provide an appraisal, a survey, and do all the legal work. So that's really cool. We should make sure that people know that. And so both the local club and the state group very much want to see the trail protected through this town. We are at a pinch point in the trail system, much like with everything else. They are open to the idea of summer use as well. Of course, we'd have to negotiate that individually or potentially with a recreation committee. The state trails administrator, Matt, highly recommended having some kind of trails committee, for lack of a better term, so that people have someone to call if there's a problem. So you can, negotiate the types of use with each landowner, deal with the maintenance, coordinate, volunteers, but most importantly, have somebody the landowners can call. Right now, they would be calling Steve Howlett. We don't want that situation. They want to call the person who's only responsible for snowmobile use. So I think that would be a pretty good solution if we can, kind of work on a trails committee or have the select board authorize one that could start that effort. He pointed me to the town he grew up in is Marshfield, and they have this town forest that has trails and a trails committee that I guess has been working really well. Another option would be to use the Green Mountain Club. I think that would be much harder considering we're not really in there. The Long Trail Corridor. And I'm going to follow up with some more recreation stuff through Forest Service. I think that's about it. The other thing to note is after many, many years, we finally got the Okemo Fire Tower approved and added to the National Historic Fire Tower Lookout Registry, which matters to
Who knew there was one?
I did. So I've been working on this for like 3 or 4 years. So no one will notice, no one will care. I do. But so it's on there.
What does it mean? I mean, that it can't be taken down, or there's money to
people look at
maintain
that
it?
People look at that for, looking for fire towers to hike to. It's sort of a little bit of a point of pride that we have. It's a CCC tower originally. I think it's cool.
I'm not quarreling with that.
No, I just there probably is no meaningful benefit to it, but it's something we can say in our town plan. It's something we can say in our brochures about the town. That's for my report. Let's move right into. That's
What's
right.
that?
Well,
Stratton
has one. Scutney
Was there
has.
one?
No, I said we can one up that.
Oh, yes.
Update application. Well, it's actually, I sent something around for the new Act 47. I don't think we need to go into detail. I just kind of did a quick summary on what I could read in the new law.
That's how you email.
Yeah, if you read the email, I think that's enough. There's people are still digesting it. Basically, we'll probably get some guidance
There's a lot
from.
to digest
There's
there.
a lot, and it's like a grab
There's
bag.
probably going to be quite a bit of stuff that comes from like the AG's office of
Yeah,
interpretation as well.
right. VLCT will probably send us some guidance too. Okay, so we have a draft for changes to the permit application, which are all before you. We might have an extra one if Stephen wants to look at it. I think he could have my copy. I brought my own. So on the first page, there's nothing substantial, just the name. It's nothing on the second page at all. Third page, is the descriptive text in number 5 is changed to not identify the types of things because the ordinance does that. So we just said any proposed development. Basically C bylaw for kinds. 7, the title is changed to say site plans because that's what's mentioned in the ordinance. I don't think we want to use different language here than the ordinance does. And changes the section number, I think, in the name of the ordinance. And then the word horizontal added because that was in the ordinance itself. The language is basically right on the ordinance. And then adding some like thes in places that they seem to be missing. On the very last page, now that I think, basically Faith has office hours and is available and checking, the emails and everything, I don't think we need to have any kind of checkbox for received by the town clerk. The review, if you want to call it whatever, starts when it is received by the AO. So I don't think we need
Do you
to.
want to put received by the AO so that they know where they have to take it to start off with?
It's there.
Oh, underneath the amount received.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we could reorder those. I didn't want to get into doing the table layout.
In the very beginning, it says they're supposed to file it with the AO. So,
And the email is on here too, in case people want to email. This is basically a checkbox for when things happen. What?
I really don't have a problem with the changes, but I'm wondering why you're doing the changes. And it should be, I think, the Board of Administration and the AO doing the changes.
The Board of Adjustment, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, misspoke.
Well, no, because
We drafted the bylaw.
Yeah, but now the bylaws in effect, and basically the Board of Adjustment, the Planning Commission basically works with the modifications of the ordinance or in long range planning. The nitty-gritty paperwork, while you initially did this form as part of the ordinance, it's now passed on to the group that's responsible. At least that's my interpretation.
What group?
So
Would be the administrative officer and the Board of Adjustment, who's responsible for not reviewing this, but having hearings based on the information in the form. I mean, I don't disagree with what you've done. I'm just asking if it's,
John,
you're the one that's supposed to do it.
Okay, we heard you. What's your?
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I can explain this. The Board of Adjustment, when somebody files this, and the administrative officer says yes or no, and they want to repeal it, or appeal it, they go to the Board of Adjustment, correct?
That's one trail.
Yeah, so
There's another one, certain specific incidences or
Yeah, but that's not
where
draft.
it goes directly to the
No.
Board of Adjustment.
No.
But it's not. But it's not for drafting. The Board of Adjustment does not draft
Anything.
permits or anything. They just review. They don't draft it. They don't draft bylaws. They don't draft permit applications. They just review after the application's been submitted.
This is an appeal.
Yes,
Correct.
Appeals, variances, and
appeals, certain specific,
or variances.
like if they're building a building and they need a variance, and it's the AO has very specific things that they're allowed to do, and other things go straight to the Board of Adjustment.
no,
My thought is that
not correct.
they should be responsible
The,
for making the changes.
no, so
Again, I don't disagree with
right.
the
So
changes.
so we heard you. So the nothing goes straight to the Board of Adjustment. Nothing. The Board of Adjustment doesn't take action on any matter whatsoever until and only something is referred to it through the administrative officer or through an appeal.
Right, but the administrative officer
That's right,
is
exactly, that's
required
right.
to follow literally what's in the ordinance with little or no discretion. So certain specific
If we-
incidences, for lack of a better word, you know, the AO has to pass it off straight to the
And that's
Board
just
of
not a-
Adjustment.
the word straight
Do
doesn't
not
sort of-
pass go.
No,
Okay.
it doesn't. The word straight there doesn't make any sense. Everything goes through the administrative. Every permit application goes through the AO. There, you can probably make an argument for the AO has discretion to change the permit application. That's just not how things have worked in this town. Things that are legislative in nature, the planning commission considers. We discuss the application form. An AO has no ability to discuss matters in that way. The way I think we've done things for a very long time in this town is that matters of this nature, in order that they can be interpreted, you know, so I think if you asked, let's just take another tact here. I assume that if you asked a lawyer or a VLCT if it was proper or advisable for an AO to write their own permit applications, I think that they would probably suggest it's not. Right? So it is normal, it's typical, and in my opinion, proper for the legislative body, the appropriate municipal panel that drafts bylaws, to at least be involved, if not the sole responsible party for coming up with the permit application form.
I have no problem
So-
with you being involved,
I'm glad
but
to
your
hear that.
function is doing ordinances. The
Okay, thank you.
administrative.
We're going to move on with the
form.
discussion. So is there any other thoughts on this?
Do not have any.
I had, so basically by removing the clerk from being able to receive this, it can only be brought in when Faith is here,
Or left, or emailed?
but that's the only time this can come in.
What can be?
No, it
It
just
can be
means
left
that
for
It
her.
can be, yeah.
Carol
But
can drop
there
it
should
off.
be somebody
Don't we
that
have a mailbox?
says, you know, like if somebody brings it in, hands it to Carol to give to Faith, shouldn't Carol be identified that she did receive it?
And
She did
doesn't
put her
she-
hands on it?
And doesn't she receive the money?
Yeah, that was actually my point. She is the only person who can say, I've received your check or whatever your fee. So I think there might be a need
To keep it on
to
there?
keep it on
Yeah.
there.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
You want to keep it on there, we'll keep it on there.
We'll do it in the same way as the BCRs. She gets the forms, the originals. She takes the fee and then she gives me the original forms.
The one just sort of nuance there is that it does have a date. So, we do sort of set a little bit of an expectation on when review starts.
But someone might sign it and then not deliver it for.
Well, not just that, but the date per se, you could put for like the amount of time until it starts being reviewed. It could be the date from when the administrative officer receives it.
That's what it is by statute.
Yeah. So I mean, so
it is just sort of a confusing thing. Well, let's just
Carol, and it's not technically.
let's just
fair to-
keep it on there. Then.
Yeah,
Well,
keep it on.
it's just potentially confusing if there's two check boxes that say received by different people.
That's right. I agree. That's why we took it
Right.
off.
Or you could put for office use only on the back page.
We could say fee received, amount received by town clerk on date. And then the rest of the application is essentially received by you. How does that feel?
Yeah, that's better. It's just that
Fee amount received by, I mean, it doesn't even have to really say by, it could be received by Liz.
I think the clerk is the only one who acknowledges receipt of funds when people come in.
Okay, well then let's just say by town clerk on the second bullet, and then we can take the first one off entirely like we have.
Yep.
Fee amount received by town clerk. How's that? Work for you?
And I'll once this is finalised, I'll clarify with Carol that it works in the same way as the BCR.
Okay. All right, the only other change on that page is changing the word mapped flood hazard areas to jurisdiction rather than trying to specify river corridors, flood hazard areas, whatever. Just say with the jurisdiction. And that would only, this is only for AO use, so it doesn't really have to be explained to the. All right, any issues with the first page? Okay. The third page? Just, that's where the most of the changes are. Yeah, they're all fairly cosmetic.
I'm fine with it.
I'm good with it.
All right. Read it like 3 times. Also.
All right. All right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
I've got a question.
All right.
If someone,
Is it seconded yet?
I second it.
Thank you.
if someone, number 7, it's asking for a significant amount of detail, which if someone is just, I'm going to say, putting a shed up or something, they're just not going to have that kind of detail.
This
But
requirement is in the ordinance. We have no ability to change this right now.
All right.
If you go and look at what the application requirements are, forget the section in the, it actually tells you here, required by section 5C.
7.
Is it, 7, there's 2. Okay, 7C. If you go look at the ordinance, it'll tell you exactly what's requested there.
And this only applies if they're building in a flood zone or river corridor. So,
Yeah, it's only if you're building in a flood zone or river corridor.
and then they ought to provide that.
We are running late. I want to limit discussion. So we have a motion seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's everybody. All right, thank you. All right, what's next? I think we're losing our light here, even though it's the longest day, right? Longest.
Yep.
Yeah.
First page somewhere.
Wildlife Crossings Pilot Program Grant Opportunity. I did not print anything about this because it's like a whole website. I sent something around an email, I think twice. The application due date is, I think, the first week of August. So Ethan suggested, our transportation planner suggested we at least try for this. I reached out to Arrowwood Environmental, who did our past, I think it was a 2008 ecology study of the town. They said they do this kind of work. I have no idea on the particulars. I wanted to see if this group is interested in pursuing that grant. I'm not entirely certain we can produce a grant application in that amount of time.
By August 1st.
By August 1st. It would be an incredible stretch considering we have a town plan to write. But is there interest in this? I think it would be good if we could fully fund it. And I didn't look at the particulars about what match or whatever, but
Is the
select board would have to approve it.
conservation committee aware of this? Like the wildlife.
Is who, Andrew?
So both the Conservation Trust and Conservation Commission have been made aware of it. I haven't heard whether they support it officially yet. Or
Conservation Trust did express support.
okay, there was support from the Conservation Trust. I haven't heard about. I was supposed to actually talk to the Conservation Commission this past month, but I didn't. They changed their agenda, so that can happen. I'm just trying to figure out if we have to get this in front of the select board, if it'd be a month turnaround for a grant application. I'm not sure it certainly wouldn't be easy, but if we could get, this apparently wealth of federal funding out there for this type of stuff, we would probably need to at least suggest that we're in support of this tonight. And then we'd have to go before the select board, which would give us a month. I don't know if the select board is in favor of this or not. I have no idea.
I mean, what's it gonna fund, like culverts and stuff for the wildlife?
I think we would have to write the grant application and what we're interested in. What I think would be useful, and what the data that we have right now that is very incomplete and maybe not as high quality and detailed as it could be, is the wildlife crossings information related to Act 171. So where are the pinch points? Where are areas, like, can we get a list of like specific recommendations? Like, okay, could this culvert be made bigger? Are there aquatic passage issues? Are there terrestrial mammal issues? Are we losing out on, deer hunting because whatever, some configuration of things could be improved? Are there specific actionable outcomes? And if we could fund this through federal money, I think that would be beneficial. I don't think we'll ever probably fund this on our own. So, and we do have a requirement to include Act 171 stuff in our town plan. This won't actually get there in time, but for the next iteration of the town plan, it could be good to have additional data. And I don't know how the study would be done. I assume they do this. They suggested that they do this. They have done this before. I don't know if it's with camera traps or with, I don't know.
Is it worth reaching out to Arrowwood and find out if it's even feasible that they could complete a study in that amount of time?
I have reached out to them and they're happy to do it if it's funded.
Okay.
This would be funding for the study.
Okay.
The study doesn't have to be done by August. This is just writing the grant.
Writing the grant out. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Requesting the money. And
To fund
then we would probably have to do an RFQ or bid process. We wouldn't be able to select them. But it's good to know somebody can, there's somebody out there that's interested to do it.
Well, I remember a number of years ago, there was concern about, we have this wildlife corridor that crosses 103. And there was a desire to create essentially a large culvert underneath 103 that would allow bears and
there is one, actually. There's a 4-footer.
No kidding.
I've been trying to get a camera through the state to put there, and I've been promised one. They haven't delivered it yet, to see if it's actually used. But
where is it?
And so it's right there at Buttermilk Falls, like right at the old 103, our decommissioned bridge issue.
Where the Risovich property was? Okay.
Yep. So, we've been talking a little bit about recreation stuff, and, that's an area where it's sort of rich with recreation opportunities. And one of the questions is, can we put a little parking area in there? And the state really wants to know what the impact on wildlife would be before we consider anything like that. This might help answer that. and, be able to design it around potential recreation. So I think there are, some really interesting benefits from doing this kind of study. Most of them you probably don't know because you don't know what you're going to get. But,
Oh, there used to be a big pull-off right there, and they blocked it out because everybody was dumping their trash.
yeah, well, it's not quite It was the old 103.
A very short distance from the old 103.
Right.
Because we've used it to park fire equipment when we were fighting fire there.
Yeah. So, what do we think? Do we want to give it a try?
Do you have an estimate of what it would take to
No.
get a grant application
No.
done?
No.
How would we figure that out?
Try. I'm not going to do any more investment. I'm not going to try to investigate this unless we want to do it. That's basically what I want to know.
Right.
Should I continue?
I mean, is this opportunity going to be available most likely next year as well?
I don't know.
I suggest that we take it to the select board, see if they'll approve it, and if they do, move forward.
Right, but the select board will want to know if we're recommending it. I think that's what John's asking us.
Well, it's sort of implied.
Yeah. But
I support it. I'll move approval.
Like I said, I don't know how much, because I think, I will probably be doing most of the work. I don't know
So
if I can pull it off.
If John wants to do most of the work, or
Yeah, and everything could get thrown out the window if my daughter needs me or something. But I'm willing to give it a try if we want. I think it might be interesting to try. Whether we can actually pull it off, I can't guarantee.
what's the cost match? Is 100% coverage?
I don't even know. You have to look again. The range of funding was enormous. It's like one of these federal programs. So it's it could be $5,000 or it could be, they were talking, I think there was $1 million on that webpage. I don't think ours would take $1 million.
I hope not, because even if it was
if
5%,
it does, I'm going to form a consulting company.
Right. I mean, I'd apply.
I think it's worthwhile. I just worry about, since it would likely be you, stretching your.
I share your concern. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that, Jim?
It's how much can you handle?
Yeah. You supportive of it?
Well, I'll support it if we can get the money. If we can't,
All right. So I'll make a motion that we support.
I think Bridget's already made the motion.
Oh, was there a motion?
I made a motion.
Oh, okay. I seconded if no one else has. What was the motion? To bring it to the select board. Was that the exact motion?
The motion was that we support soliciting this grant by initially starting with the select board and then proceeding after that.
All right. Motion's made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, great, thank you, unanimous. So we'll see what they say. I'll try to get the particulars together for them. When is their meeting next? No, they just had one.
they just
Yeah, so
So
you're
it's gonna be July now.
You're going to be 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's gonna be tight. I don't want to be doing it. We'll see. I'll try to get something together too. Anything on Station Road?
The Station Road,
We still don't know a whole lot about
it
the
was
status.
left at.
Yeah.
That's the last that I saw in the select board minutes, was that there was never an official vote to close the bridge,
Right.
but there was, never official proceedings with
Right.
the regional planning commission.
Right.
And the Star Lake Recreation Area, I've come back and looked again, and
Okay. Well, we're gonna scratch that then. There's nothing there.
Well, I'll tell you what I found if you want to hear.
Sure, go for it.
The Belmont Improvement Society went defunct. I can't give you an exact time, but about 40 years ago, perhaps.
40.
But they were the initial group that set the rules and posted them and all of that. And then when they went defunct, they gave the land to the town, and the town has been managing it ever since. And they didn't apparently change any of the rules. but there are archives supposedly in a closet in the library.
Sorry, what's in the library?
The archives of the Belmont Improvement Society.
Interesting.
We're in a closet in the library.
Now, whether or not they would still be there, because, you know, the libraries, that building's been completely redone. So I don't know whether they would still be there.
All right, maybe we can try to track that down
Nothing
anyway.
there.
So I think it's fair to say that the rule or no residents allowed is probably not enforceable. And we might want to suggest if the sign is ever revisited, taking that off. Okay, anything else on that? I think that's a good place to leave it. No, okay, so decide on list of maps to use. So again, so like before I started digging into making a map, and I was hoping to kind of get on that pretty soon, we should decide what ones we're making. So I sent around this chart here of all the kind of ones I looked at in nearby towns and sort of exemplary towns. There's a wide variety of different map types in names. Some of them, like Ludlow has, Manchester and Ludlow kind of have the most. Some of them I don't think we need. I don't think, you know, we need like where the solar resources are. We're not really talking about a lot of, we don't have an enhanced energy plan, you know, we don't need wind, where the wind resources are and so on. So cutting to the chase, why don't I just say what I thought we might be able to benefit from. I dropped off current land use because, I mean, we don't need to know that really. It's not really, it's going to change the minute we print it. So future land use, transportation, utilities and facilities, wildlife habitat, forest blocks and connectors. I added village center on here. I thought that might be useful to zoom in. We also need the village center on the future land use map as a requirement. And then landforms and elevation. And I chose that because I thought it kind of brought a bunch of them together. Some other towns call them contours, or meaning sand and gravel, agricultural soils. You know, there's a variety of different sort of, I thought landforms and elevation kind of could capture like slopes and, you know, that sort of stuff all together. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 7 in potentially village center. I mean, village center is sort of optional, so 6 or 7. And I think that's a manageable number compared to what some of these towns are doing. Like that's what, 10, 12.
Like Shrewsbury Town Plan had tons of stuff in it that was like nobody cares.
Yeah, they weren't one of the worst ones. They had an aerial map. It's like, okay, you know, it's interesting. Like watersheds map, like, are we in the Black River? Are we in Otter Creek? Like, you know, I don't think you need that. Like, I mean, you could find that information when you need it, but I don't think it really, you know, it's not going to be used by Act 250. It's not really educational. I don't know. I don't think we need to like spin our wheels, waste our time. So how does that sound? Not having a current land use map.
I think a current land use map is reasonably important to then allow people to compare to the future land use map, but that's my opinion.
But
I
land,
didn't mean to.
I mean, land, technically land use can be dropped at any point in time or put into land use.
I mean, I guess so. My counter to that is it's not really doing that. You know, you're not exactly saying like, you know, past Act 250s would be, you know, would use this land use designation. In our, I mean, I guess unless current land use map, you meant like the previous town plan's future land use map, or
No, what's going on right now is what I was thinking.
oh, so future land use map isn't really like about what's going on. It's about how you want, how, you know, the vision of how you want to guide things or what might happen. Ask it a different way. So what things are you hoping to show in a current land use map? What is, how do you describe going on?
What's, you know, where's the existing forests and agricultural and development and that kind of thing. And then the future shows what's next.
think the town plan, I mean, I could be wrong about the town plan, it's not saying, like, a lot of the stuff we've done doesn't say like, this is what we have and this is what we want in like the maps. I mean, I guess we do say it in words, like this is what we currently have and this is what we'd like to see. But would the mapping be more for like, this is what we want in the future?
For future land use.
Yeah, that's what I mean, and like,
But it also can be much less detailed, right? So like, I mean, one problem with the current land use map, I mean, I have a few issues with it, is that it's extraordinarily difficult to characterize how things are. Like, you know, describe everything that is. You know, that's challenging.
Okay.
You know, so like where the
Well,
forests are, I mean, that's, you know, we have the natural resource, what I was suggesting, forest blocks and connectors, and where the forests are today. You know, that we're not predicting where forests will be. It's how it is.
Same with for wildlife habitat, really.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Utilities, transportation, those are all characterizing today, but it's, you know, current land use, it's a bit like, you know, Stewart Road, is it commercial? Is it industrial? Is it residential? It has all of those. I mean, do I put that on, you know, do you put that on the map, or I don't know, it's really tricky.
all right, don't worry about it. Just do future.
Are there any other thoughts on that? I mean, that's just my opinion.
I think you could take your land use map in another direction and use it to map the properties that are in land use.
well, I think John's more like talking about like what the land, not per se the land use, things that are in land use, but like overall what the land's being used for in town, correct or incorrect?
I think, you know, it's up to the individual towns and how they interpreted it. So Ludlow has one for the town and the village. Plymouth has one. Weston has one.
But it wasn't for like people
We'd have
in
to
the
look.
land use program.
Right,
It
no,
was
it's not.
it's for the overall, like this is being used for commercial and this over here is being used for residential and this is being used for ag lands is what the map was showing, not per se a map of who's in the land use program or what land is being
Yeah.
in it.
That's true.
Let me take that. I'll take that point and I will go back and look and see what the existing maps are using current land use for. And then we can.
Yeah, I think Bridget was thinking that like it was about like the current use, like
Current,
conserve, like
UVA.
yeah, land, not like describing what the land was.
Is that what you had in mind, Bridget?
Repeat that, Andrew. It was hard to.
Were you thinking that we were going to do a map of things that were like in the current use program, not a map of like what every single parcel in town is being used for?
Well, I wasn't thinking it would be every single parcel. I thought it would be just broad blocks, if you will. But no, I wasn't thinking current use per se of the program current use.
Okay.
I was thinking broad blocks of how the town has developed.
All right. Well, so what I'll do is I'll go back and look at what other plans are putting on their current land use map, and then we can come back to that.
Yeah, you don't have to do it now.
But until then, I'm going to sort of operate under the presumption that we're probably not going to do it, but open to changing our minds. So do those other ones sound good to you? Again, future land use, transportation, utilities and facilities, wildlife habitat, forest blocks and connectors, landforms and elevation, and then maybe a separate one for village center, which I think some towns do as sort of an inset on one of the others, but I'm not entirely sure what we would show on that one. But does that sound okay? Start there? Just to get
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think we're down to public comments. I think, is Donna, are you still with us? Do you have a public comment?
I am still here. Hi, how are you?
Okay.
I don't have any comments. That I'm a little. I feel like this has been informative, but I feel like I'm not quite up to speed where all of you guys are. So I'm only working with a half deck. So I feel reticent to make any comment, actually. So I'm in the learning stage.
Okay, what is it that you're learning?
I actually joined the call because I was interested in hearing about the septic. So I'm just getting up to speed on what's being considered.
Cool. Yeah, so we're just getting up to speed as well. So just in case there's any confusion about it, there will be separate discussions relating to the Belmont plan. This is one that we were just wanted to bring the Planning Commission sort of into the discussion on where, how wastewater systems are, projects are sort of structured. And we had no decisions have been made about this in any way, shape, or form. But just sort of like getting an understanding of what the landscape looks like, how a project might get started, should there be a desire to. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I didn't know, John, if you were, I had written you a separate email. Is that what you're thinking that I should comment on?
The email that I sent you about the workshop. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. But that. So for the last, I'm sorry to take people's time. For the last sort of 15 minutes, as you've been talking about the maps and all of that stuff, I'm clueless. So I feel like I just. I'm not sure what you want me to comment on other than.
I'm sorry, there's a misunderstanding maybe. We're talking about today this is the Planning Commission, and we're talking about, we're rewriting our town plan. And part of the reason we're doing that on an accelerated schedule is so that the village center designation can be renewed. That renewal requires a town plan update. So there's a wide variety of different initiatives happening. There's the Belmont Planning Workshop, and then a plan that we will be, involving Belmont and the rest of the community in over the next couple of months. That's a separate initiative. There's the town plan that's happening at the same time. And the village wastewater discussion tonight is sort of a little bit in between both of those. I'm hoping that, the town plan will be influenced by what we heard from Lynette. And I was hoping some of the people from the working group for the Belmont plan would be in attendance. Well, certainly Faith is. So I'm hoping that it would feed both of these different initiatives, the Belmont planning and the town plan, which are, of course, related, but distinct. And I know it's about as clear as mud.
Wait, I think you over-answered that one.
That's actually very helpful. That is extremely helpful because it allows me to understand how the pieces fit together.
Right. The town plan is something that we're drafting that will touch on almost everything in town. The Belmont issues and wastewater being just one of them. The discussions around wastewater, as you heard from Lynette, there's a requirement for the state funding that stakeholders in the village be involved. And so we will be having many, many more conversations with people in the village about wastewater issues and the state of the system and potential improvements in the coming months. So maybe that's helpful for framing purposes.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
In the discussions, I'm sorry I haven't responded to your latest email. My daughter's been sick this past week. We finally got her medicine she needed yesterday. And I promise to get back to you on that as soon as possible. Maybe I can schedule a call.
No worries. No worries.
Days. Okay. Any other comments?
I'm just questioning, Donna, are you going to plan on attending the planning commission meetings going forward?
Basically, I saw the meeting from, I think it was the Mount Holly, the thing that comes out every morning, and realized that I had a free Wednesday evening, so decided that this would be great for me to get an update. I think it's hard for me to commit to joining all of them. I'll join as many as I can, but it's a huge challenge for me because I feel like I live in two places, and both places require a certain amount of attention. So I get torn a lot.
All right. No, the reason I asked is I was just going to suggest if you were to, on a regular basis, attend, John may include you in the emails he sends so that you see the attachments that they're talking about prior to the meeting and that you may have a better understanding. In fact, I would probably like to see those prior to the meeting since I tend to attend most of these meetings, so that I sort of understand what you're talking about prior to the discussion. But, that's what I was thinking for you also.
Yeah, so Donna, we're not typically going to be discussing the Belmont wastewater or related issues in the next few months in the Planning Commission. This is a little bit of a one-off, and I'll be happy. I'll happy to include you on all of the goings on with the Belmont plan in the next couple of months. There will be more meetings coming up, but none are currently scheduled.
It's John, I feel like, the whole process has been nothing but open. And so it's more just me getting up to speed. I feel like any information that I've ever asked for has readily been available. So I appreciate this group's willingness to do that.
All right, great. Is there anything else?
Upcoming meetings, especially given the holiday.
Yeah, so especially given the holiday. Are people going to be here on the 5th? Is that an option? It is technically after the holiday.
Not ideal for me,
Not
but
ideal. Conflict of a meeting.
We can skip it. Or no, is that the regular meeting?
No, the 5th would be the special meeting.
Yeah, special meeting, so that was.
By then, I'm hoping to have talked to Craig at the school.
Yeah.
I don't know if I will have a map ready by then, but we do have transportation already that we talked about a couple months ago. It would be a test run of our AV system.
Is the next regular meeting the 19th?
19th. That one we're definitely going to have because we basically have like 3 meetings left until we're supposed to have this thing done.
Okay.
Just a heads up, I have a commitment on the 19th, which was booked months ago. So
Okay.
I won't be here.
Let's try to do the 5th. We'll try to keep it short. We'll try to keep it laser focused on the plan maps.
You're funny.
You're laughing at the duration?
Yeah. Well, anytime
Yeah, I've never seen a short one.
we're gonna be like,
I'll do my best. Yeah, let's try to hold it on the 5th because I think if we skip, we'll lose our schedule. At least got to get a couple of maps looked at. I'll try to get at least one of those at least kind of framed out. And there's only 7.
exactly. Just go to the 19th. We can discuss it all then. So we only have one late night. That's it.
All right. Anything else? So we wait till 9 o'clock. 8:59. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Production services by Okemo Valley TV.